So when, may I ask, was the last time that you just took a day off? I see. From work, from school, from any demands on your time and energy. I mean, maybe it was a vacation. But even then, separated by all those miles, were you still connected to all those things that you left behind? Sitting on the beach, perhaps, did you allow your mind to wander in consideration of all that was waiting on you at home? Did you find yourself ever sneaking a peek to check email, just in case the one person from whom you were expecting an important work-related reply might have finally gotten around to it? You know what I mean. Because we have that sly little move sitting at the dinner table in the restaurant where no one can see but you. You check your email under the table. Or maybe your partner excuses themselves and goes to the restroom, and man, there is no reason to even hide it then. In full view, you just check your phone. On vacation. And in your mind, you think, I would just rest easier here, knowing that that one deal had actually gone through. Now, perhaps today is not the best day to ask the question about taking a day off. I mean, school has been canceled all week long. Many of us have not been able to go to work every day. Then again, I'll bet that makes it the perfect day to ask that question, because you were likely given that gift of a day off. No expectations. And what did you do? You said, GCCS better not cancel school again tomorrow. I have got way too much to do. I heard you. Even our downtimes tend to be filled up with all sorts of expectations that we place on ourselves, don't they? What a perfect day to catch up on housework. Catch up on those bills. Don't look now, but April 15th is coming. And a day off to do the taxes might be in order. We do dare to take a day completely off, and what words come out of our mouths every time? I feel like I should be doing something. And a rather interesting, compelling, even challenging book, Old Testament scholar Walter Brueggemann draws a disturbing comparison to our almost compulsive need to always be doing something productive to the slave mentality that the pharaohs of Egypt instilled in the Hebrew people. And this book is called Sabbath as Resistance. And we are going to use it as the guiding basis for our Lenten spiritual journey here at First Christian. Our compulsive need to always be doing something productive is something like the slave mentality of the Hebrew people living in Egypt. What do you think of that? The argument goes that the Pharaoh, who was understood to be something of a living God among his people, in addition to being their monarch, a political leader, that the Pharaoh was driven by this fear of never having enough, always needing to produce more grain to store up for times of famine, always needing more places to store this grain, which was as valuable as gold for those who controlled it. And so always needing more bricks for building those storage houses and monuments to his fame and power, always needing more and more bricks. The Hebrew slaves made the bricks. And so the mentality instilled in them was to never stop working, never stop producing, never stop the system of acquiring more and more and more. Does that sound familiar? Because the parallel between those Hebrew slaves and that Egyptian economy is argued to be that we live in much the same way. Driven by the culture around us to always do more and more, acquire more and more of the latest and the greatest. To identify not with Pharaoh, but with the great God of the market who tells us to consume for the good of everyone who is involved in the system. Bombarded by media and advertisements and sheer desire for what others have around us, we never stop. Making bricks, making money to inject back into the economy somehow, that's the parallel that Brueggemann draws for us. And for any of us who have even the slightest inclination that who we are becoming as people is a frightening departure from what God has in mind, this book has a surprising prescription. Take a day off completely. Say no to the culture of now, the culture of more, the culture of endless work with the very biblical commandment to remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. I'm actually fascinated with this because it comes from a guy, Walter Brueggemann, who is about as, I guess, mainstream and rational as they come. He is, as I say about several people, one of the people on my bus. I listen to him. And what I mean is that this is not some fundamentalist idea asking us to adopt the old rigid rules of the Puritans. It's not a kind of Seventh-day Adventism packaged to appeal to a new generation of people. Instead, this is an invitation for us to discover an ancient wisdom of incorporating regular days of complete rest into our lives as a spiritual practice that is life-giving and world-changing. And what that could look like for any of us, what day that might be on a regular basis, how we might be at complete rest. We have irregular work schedules and soccer practice and a whole litany of pressures and demands, and it will probably take some time to figure that out for each of us, if we choose. But the first thing we want to do is understand. This is actually one of God's commandments given to Moses. You remember the stone tablets with the 10 Commandments that we like to argue about whether or not they should be placed in our public places? Those 10 Commandments? The fourth one mandates that God's people remember the Sabbath and keep it holy by not doing anything at all related to work. You remember, they read like this. Then God spoke all these words, I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an idol, whether in the form of anything that is in heaven or above, or that is on the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing children for the iniquity of parents to the third and fourth generation of those who reject me, but showing steadfast love to the 1,000th generation of those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not make wrongful use of the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not acquit anyone who misuses his name. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. You shall not do any work, you, your son or your daughter, your male or female slave, your livestock, or the alien resident in your towns. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that is in them, but rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and consecrated it. That's the first 4. The Sabbath is number 4. And I imagine you will know this one pretty well after the next 6 weeks. But notice it is there with the same importance as, say, I don't know, thou shalt not murder. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Thou shalt not steal. I'm coming up on 15 years now of pastoral ministry in churches. I have yet to sit with someone needing to confess to not taking a full day of rest from their labor every week, right? We just don't take it all that seriously. Maybe we find it to be like this naive little holdover from the ancient world that surely God understands does not fit into our modern world anymore, right? What do you think? I'm just guessing here. I haven't had a good regular Sabbath any more than you have. But the Sabbath commandment isn't really serious, is it? I mean, it's kind of like the appendix or your tonsils. From what I can tell, we can kind of manage without it, can't we? I mean, I can not kill people all the day long. I haven't actually stolen anything that I can think of in a very long time. Are you with me? I mean, Sabbath is like an option as far as I can tell. I want to go back to Walter Brueggemann's initial claim that we are living as a kind of parallel to the ancient Hebrew slaves with a mentality shaped by the economy of always having to work, and produce more bricks, more bricks, more bricks. The implication of this way of living and understanding ourselves will be very interesting in the next few weeks, because the argument goes that a world without rest ceases to live as neighbors to one another. For now, however, the invitation is to consider just how those 10 commandments begin. We read this. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, the house of slavery. I mean, hear what that says. Because the entire list of what God says in these words is situated in the understanding of who God is. That God is the one who liberated the enslaved Hebrews from that awful place where Pharaoh enforced his endless need for people to work. And God says, you shall have no other gods before me. It is as if there is no understanding the nature of who God is without reference to the freedom God gave those slaves coming out of Egypt. And then to compare and contrast this one true God with all the imagined gods that people have come up with. It puts us squarely within this question of whether or not Pharaoh's relentless demands for work, for Pharaoh was considered a kind of living God on earth, whether or not Pharaoh's relentless demands for work and production still demand our allegiance. Pharaoh, or something that just looks an awful lot like him. What do you think? Because it is here that the commandment of Sabbath seems to offer this striking alternative. That instead of this powerful mythology of doing, work, produce, bricks. This new God steps in and says, you shall cease from all your labors for an entire day, every week. And on top of that, God says this as a clear comparison to all those other gods, because the one true God is nothing like any of them. I mean, remember, this God actually takes a Sabbath rest too. I mean, everybody knows that part of the story. God made the heavens and the earth and everything that lives within them. God did all this in how many days? 6 days. And on the seventh day, do you remember? Well, this God rested. I want to invite you along on the rest of this Lenten journey of study about the possibilities of Sabbath with a simple proposal. I mean, the God who finds it very good to rest from all labors on a regular basis is the very God who can lead any of us and all of us out of some new Egypt where Pharaoh is still demanding of us our very lives. I mean, in that way, we might hear anew the words of Jesus, who embodies Sabbath rest. Do you remember? Come to me, all you that are weary and are carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light.